This is Dune Talk, a DuneNewsNet.com production. Join us now for the latest Dune news, reactions, and lively discussions.
Hey all, welcome back to another episode of Dune Talk. So this is the show where we talk about everything in the world of Dune, whether it's the movies, books, comics, games, anything that's going on related to this science fiction epic story that's already been going for many generations. So this is Marcus Gabriel here today with Garin.
Hey everybody, it's Garin. Excited to be back. Just when you thought there wasn't a lot to talk about, we have a lot to talk about today. So I'm excited to get into it.
Yes, everyone. Hi, Johnny Sobchak here. It's been a bit of a layoff, but we are returning, and I'm excited to be back and chatting it up with the guys and just kind of getting up to date on everything Dune.
Hey, Simon here, Australia. Welcome to the party. Hope you're enjoying the movie.
So let's actually go ahead and start with movie news.
Dune movie news.
So the first story we want to cover is box office updates, and that ties into what Simon just mentioned, that the movie has premiered in Australia and New Zealand. So we know the opening weekend from there. And also it's returned to IMAX theaters, both in the United States and many other countries as well. So if you didn't have a chance to watch it in IMAX those first few weeks, whenever it was available in your country, that there are currently showings going on. So the big update is that Dune has reached 382.2 million at the worldwide box office as of this past weekend, December 5th. And the film earned 5.1 million overseas, and that includes Australia, as I mentioned. So most of that came from Australia, 3.4 million from its premiere weekend. Dune has, as expected, crossed the 100 million mark domestically. And now with IMAX, we're seeing things pick up again a bit. So I want to start with one question to you, Simon. We've seen that Dune has been an overwhelming success, but especially when we look at the overseas box office. So 73% of that 382 million is coming from overseas. And if you look at this year, it's the fourth best performing Hollywood movie overseas, while domestically it's the seventh best. So from your perspective, what's driving this, I guess, a bit better reception overseas compared to domestic?
I wonder if people are more familiar with the source material, the novel. That could be it. I know growing up in France, a lot of science fiction is big in France. I'm going to use France as the example. Like my brother, he's a big sci-fi guy. He got me into Philip K. Dick. He's the one that introduced me to Blade Runner when I was younger. So I feel like there's a big reader audience that might be familiar with the works of Frank Herbert, and I think that's what's driving it. You know, it's always interesting to see different cultures, different, countries, to see how they react to films. And I think maybe a lot of people were afraid here or were just not interested. And obviously, COVID has a big deal with it. Some people might just not go to the movies. I don't know. It's interesting. I'm curious if it is a culture thing that people might just be more interested because they have less selections also. Maybe it's the audience. Maybe Rebecca Ferguson is from Sweden, I think. Last time I checked, I think she was born there. Chalamet is, French-American, so he has his fan base in France also. It's maybe the international cast. I don't know. I'm curious to know what you guys think. Why it's doing so well overseas compared to, the US and Canada.
Hey, you guys, I remember in '84, Lynch's movie, as you know, didn't do well in the US. But I remember just a couple of years later hearing that it was still very popular in Germany, that it became kind of a cult favorite in Germany when it took many more years for it to become a cult favorite here. So there was something about Germany that I remember seeing as a young teenager that they resonated with. There was something that captured, their attention around that film that didn't get captured among the viewers here. So I don't know. There must be maybe some cultural differences. Maybe like you said, Simon, more acceptance or more readership around the original novel. I'm not sure.
I mean, let's not understate how well it is doing domestically. I feel that it would be easy to overlook that, especially considering the HBO Max stipulation, which has been pretty detrimental to essentially every single movie that has come out in that release strategy for Warner Brothers this year. Their only other real significant hit is Godzilla versus Kong, which of course did gangbusters overseas, particularly in places like China and Japan. Those kind of big fantasy VFX heavy movies always are going to do well in that market. And, for cultural reasons, Godzilla is a Japanese creation. Looking at it from that perspective, some of the biggest markets where it did like crazy numbers comparative to the US would be Russia, France, Germany. And those, you mentioned the 1984 film doing very well and kind of having a second coming of sorts in those similar marketplaces. I'm not super surprised. I think people were just surprised how much people seem to love it and how well, like, this was the biggest movie in France since Star Wars. Like it was on that level, even more than other well-known franchises like Fast and the Furious and some others. So I'm very pleased, of course, to see how well it is doing over there. It did kind of so in China, which was a little bit disappointing and kind of, not as well as expected, but hopefully on part two, it can build upon what they've established there. But it did did much better than The Rise of Skywalker, which is kind of saying something. I think they do not have that nostalgia for Star Wars like we do in the West. It's still, it has done better than I think most people expected by far. Worldwide, it's closing in on 400 million. Whether or not it'll actually reach 400 million remains to be seen, but it doesn't really matter at this point. It's not going to affect anything. It's not going to affect how the sequel, it's obviously already been greenlit, but I don't think that's going to affect anything about how they approach the sequel financially. 400 million, that'd be a good number for this movie before the pandemic, I think. So if you're factoring in the pandemic, and Simon made a good point about people like picking and choosing, like, what are you going to go to the theater for? And given the statistics and the box office numbers, especially in the US domestically, people, like, it's undeniable that people actually they had the choice of seeing this on HBO or going to the theater. And they actually chose to drive and leave their house and go to the theater to watch Dune instead of just sitting at home and watching it. And that's a huge testament, I think, to, the film itself, but also the marketing. They really pushed the IMAX angle quite a bit. It did like ridiculous numbers for IMAX domestically, especially. It's really hard to get a successful movie out there that isn't superheroes or something super established like a James Bond or like a Godzilla and King Kong. It is pretty scarce. And, Warner Brothers, perfect example. Even their kind of more high profile films this year, whether it was Space Jam 2 or The Suicide Squad, they have not done well. They have not had a pleasant time trying to make these into hits, despite all their efforts. And they put a lot of effort into this, no doubt. But I think organically, this grew into something bigger and had that long-term success and strong openings and strong legs. So the 100 million number that it has cracked domestically that's a huge number. I think that's even more important than the 400 million that it's getting close to. So I think that's really important. That's great. It's one of the biggest releases of the entire pandemic domestically, worldwide. And it just, I had high expectations. I was more bullish on it than 99% of people probably in its financial prospects, but I am still, surprised and impressed. And I'm really, I think it just bodes very well for the franchise. And, sky's the limit as far as what part two can do without HBO Max, and hopefully, fingers crossed, without as much of a restraint with regards to the pandemic.
Johnny, can you translate those numbers on HBO Max accurately to what if it wasn't streaming on HBO Max? Would those people have gone to the theater? I guess we don't really know, right?
Yeah, it's very hard to say. And the interesting part is when those opening weekend numbers came out for how it was on HBO Max, it had like 1.9 million, I think was the estimate or the projection based on, whatever figures and algorithms they use. It was not like a very impressive number by any means. Like that was it was better than some of other Warner Brothers films this year, but it wasn't near the top necessarily. But since then, at least to my knowledge, I haven't seen any numbers or heard of any numbers since then. And usually I have been paying very good attention to those, and I haven't seen any. I don't know what that means. I don't know if they're intentionally not, talking about them, or even third parties who should have access to that haven't said anything about it to my knowledge. So I don't know how well it did over there. I mean, it did well enough. Clearly, they saw that opening weekend and they're like, okay, we can do part two. You could look at opening weekend. Would it have added? It opened with 41 million in the US. Without HBO Max, does that go to 45 million? Does it go into the 50s? I would say probably around 50, just based on the hype.
Often the discussion we're focusing on the box office numbers because that's traditionally how we're gauging the success of movies, and like it's more transparent in terms of the data that we do get. But I do want to emphasize that just because like it was on streaming, like that also contributes to its success. So like maybe we're not seeing the numbers at the moment, but for example in their next quarterly update, we might see like numbers in the increase of subscribers and so on. But like whether they're getting that money through the box office or through streaming, at the end of the day, that's still a positive impact for the movie. And of course, you will have overlapping. Like some people, they may have gone to the theater, like if it wasn't on HBO Max, but there's going to be like a certain percentage, which we don't know exactly, that they would have never gone to the theater regardless what. So these are people who had their eyes on Dune because of this release. So it has its pros and cons. So I think it's important to keep that in mind, that this is also contributing towards the success of these movies. Of course, we'll see in the long run how that works out. Going to our second story for today, we had a number of film awards going on. There's been all these for your consideration campaigns, and one of the bigger news from last week was regarding the 2022 Hollywood Critics Association Film Awards, and Dune was nominated for 10 categories. So that was the number one nominated film. So like like in terms of recognition, huge win, nominations for Best Picture, Best Director, and 8 other awards, including cinematography, editing, score. So really good to see this. Johnny, I want to hear your thoughts about these awards and other news that you've been hearing.
Yeah, so we're in the. I should know more than anyone because I am in the North Carolina where I live, the Film Critics Association. So we are in the thick of like awards. It's not awards season necessarily because there's not a lot of awards being given out at this point. It's mostly nominations from critic groups and things like that, and then other voting academies but you can't see it, but my bedroom is loaded with screeners and books and all types of materials that they send out, which I'm very fortunate to be a part of and very fortunate to receive that. And I have a lot of movies to watch between now and the end of the year, but for voting purposes. But yeah, so this is a big one. Hollywood Critics Association. Kind of says it in the title. It's Hollywood. So there's a lot of people who are very close to the industry, very in tune with kind of what the culture, what the pulse of everything is like there. And they, in recent years, they line up pretty closely with what the Oscars do. And that's the kind of the key thing here, because there's a lot of film critics groups, and not to like put anyone over the other necessarily, but there's certainly, New York and LA, those are where people are going to focus the most. And so this is good. This is very good. Yeah, I would say for every category they do, where there's like 5, nominees, and a lot of these categories, not every category they do is an Oscar category, but a lot of them are. They, I'd say 3 or 4 out of the 5 usually line up with what the Oscars do. So, and there's some categories that they did where I feel like it could be a 1-for-1, like they're totally on the right track. And yeah, doing really well, showing up in all those spots. This was really like kind of the first true indication, because it's a long way, and it seems like every day there's some new critics group or some other voting body is putting together their nominations or announcing their winners. And this is a really good one. And we'll see when they announce the winners, and I think that's in the beginning of January, how many it actually ends up winning, which could be none, but it could be some, which I imagine it will be. And so that'll be really cool as well. But yeah, it's a good number. I mean, that's pretty much the number for any voting body, especially the significant ones like the televised shows like BAFTA or Critics' Choice or the Oscars. Those are the categories where, and those shows where I expect it to show up with 9, 10, 11 nominations and several wins. Today, actually, we had the American Film Institute. They do their top 10 films of the year. They also do their top 10 television shows of the year. And this year with the top 10 films, Dune was once again, they were included in this one as well. And so they're already, if you've checked Dune social media, by the time you're listening to this, they posted, their new piece, their new graphic with that. And this will stack up throughout the next few weeks. You'll notice. So last week they had their National Board of Review stamp on there. And then this week they posted, American Film Institute. And they added the stamp right next to the National Board of Review one. So next week when the Golden Globe nominations come out and some other awards, Critics' Choice as well, this whole graphic will just fill up with award nominations and award wins, and they're gonna pump that up. The Dune marketing team will certainly be pumping that. They'll be using that to their advantage, especially with the home release right around the corner. Still exciting. It's kind of like sports. Like you just root for it, and if they don't get it, what are you gonna do? Like there's not. It's totally out of your control and doesn't ultimately matter that much. But it is nice for them to get recognition because, of course, as we all know, they put a lot of planning and detail and thought into making this movie in every single department. And so it's nice to see that it's already gaining traction. And I certainly expect next week, I believe it's Monday morning, we will get the Golden Globe nominations and we will also get the Critics' Choice nominations. So it will certainly be there. It will certainly be popping up and getting some significant traction and again, attention with those two. So this is exciting.
If you notice from these 10 nominations, none of them were for specific acting categories. Let me ask you, Garin, does that surprise you that there have been specific call-outs for the actors themselves?
I was a little uncomfortable with the fact that there wasn't any mention, and I know we've talked about on here before that when you compare the acting performances with what's out there, at least in this awards season this year, that it doesn't quite compare. I guess the thought that comes to my mind is, but can you take it within the context of that story? And maybe that's a cop-out, but I feel like to be in a movie, the way these audiences are completely enraptured in watching Dune, it means the acting is being done superbly well. So I guess, and Johnny, maybe you have more thoughts on this, but to me, it feels a little disjointed or a little imbalanced that there wouldn't be even one acknowledgement, because I thought the acting was fantastic. I thought it was well beyond what I've experienced so many times in a Star Wars film or a Marvel film.
Yeah, that is certainly true. I think, they talk about genre bias, and I think that was a big reason why people were kind of skeptical of Dune even being a major awards player this year, even though all the signs were there. And I tried to tell people that. And it has overcome that significantly in a lot of departments. But acting, even the greatest genre exercises and masterpieces, whether that's, in recent history, at least something like Mad Max Fury Road or Blade Runner 2049 or Interstellar or, any of these others. I mean, it might get all the technical nominations or awards in the world, but the acting never comes into play. Like they never even really look at it, which is unfortunate. I mean, Matthew McConaughey in Interstellar is an amazing performance. Anyone that's seen that movie, probably my favorite of his and arguably his best. Fury Road, Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron, incredible. Like, you couldn't imagine the movie without them, and Charlize Theron in particular I thought was amazing. And Ryan Gosling, even Blade Runner 2049 got overlooked a lot for awards, and Villeneuve is certainly getting his kind of revenge with this season. But I think Ryan Gosling, I mean, he is an amazing actor, and that is an amazing performance, and maybe his best as well. So it's just a lot of times, whether it's sci-fi, action, these movies seem to get really overlooked, unfortunately. I know this is a competitive season, as you mentioned, so maybe regardless, there are some categories like what I'm voting for. I don't know if I'm necessarily going to be nominating any of the performances in this movie. I'm certainly thinking about it, but it is strong competition. And I say that as like a Dune shill, as everyone knows, but yeah, you only get so many choices. And in some of these, some groups do it differently. Some add more nominations. So you are more likely to see certain people pop up. I will say we should acknowledge and shout out, I will do it, the Sunset Circle Awards, which is another critics group in LA. They only got established last year, I think. So this is their second season of this. And I don't know how many members there are. I do know a few of the names of the people involved, and some interesting choices, but they got a lot of attention because it was like, people were like, this is like the Dune Awards, because they clearly loved Dune. And some of the winners and nominations, they were for acting. So the winner of they have a scene stealer category, and the winner of that was Sharon Duncan Brewster for playing Liet Kynes in Dune, which I thought was pretty awesome. For best ensemble cast, Dune won, actually, beating out Coda, which was the runner-up. Best supporting actress runner-up was Rebecca Ferguson, and Katrina Balfe from Belfast. They gave her the win, and then it won best director, and then it won best film. So, and that's just a small critics group, but at least it's showing that there is some serious consideration in some circles, at least, that the acting in the movie, the cast of the movie should be considered. And I think it really should. I mean, Critics' Choice is another group where they do have a larger acting nomination selection than like the Oscars, for example, which is only 5. I would love to see Rebecca Ferguson pop up there, maybe Timothée Chalamet. And then also the SAG Awards. That's a very actor focused, of course, Screen Actors Guild, very acting focused group, and they nominate a best ensemble. And of course, these people are talking about Belfast and Tick Tick Boom and West Side Story and King Richard, which are all, I've seen some of those. They're great performances and great ensembles. But I think Dune, so much of it relies on the cast, and the cast is so well cast and so perfectly acted and attuned to those roles. I think it would be a disappointment, I think, if not only just one person didn't get noticed, but the entire cast. And I think that would be a nice place for them to show up this season, I think. And the film has gotten a lot of traction, a lot of attention. So maybe it will, maybe it won't, but that remains to be seen. And there's a lot of elements to it there. And Garin, you kind of hit the nail on the head.
It's interesting to me, though, that in this era of inclusion and non-bias, and that I can see it. I'm not an expert like you, Johnny, but I can see the bias against sci-fi and fantasy films. And generally speaking, right? I mean, Lord of the Rings garnered quite a few awards, but I hope that bias can be neutralized somehow, because you're right. There are a lot of great films, a lot of great acting in this season, but again, you can't have a spectacular, enveloping type of a film without excellent acting, right? So can't that be acknowledged? I hope one day it can.
Ian McKellen, he got nominated for Fellowship of the Ring, which is an amazing nomination, especially in retrospect. But you're telling me no one else deserves to get nominated from The Lord of the Rings, one of the best casts of all time? I mean, Return of the King. I mean, what's going on in that movie? Like on the acting level, like everyone is just bringing their A game like so hard. Sean Astin in particular, I think. Like, how do you not recognize him? I think that's just crazy, and that's one of the biggest Oscar sweep of all time. Not a single acting nomination for Return of the King. Likewise with Star Wars, I mean, you go back to Alec Guinness, who actually did get nominated for the original Star Wars, but I don't think there's been any nominations since then, which, you could debate about. But I will say the one silver lining potentially going forward is that if anything, the acting is only going to get better, I would say. They're going to get more comfortable in these roles. They're going to earn more respect in these roles. They're going to become more famous for these roles. And that's something where I think, and there's a lot of great dramatic content on the way, especially if they get to Dune Messiah. So I think Chalamet certainly has a play there. People love Zendaya. If she gets a beefier role as Chani in the next movie or two, that's something they could look forward to as well. And then Rebecca Ferguson, of course, is like Jessica, who's getting a lot of love so far, but not necessarily with the nominations and awards. I think those are some areas that could be interesting and, could potentially garner more attention in the next entries.
Next, let's go into some expanded news.
The Duniverse, books, comics, games, collectibles, and more.
So our first story in this segment is the video games. So we haven't talked about video games almost at all on this show, and that's because there really hasn't been much to talk about. But finally, the past week, we got an update on basically it's called the unannounced Dune survival game that Funcom is working on. So they first acquired the rights from Legendary in 2019, and we know that they started work later that year, and there have been some job postings in 2020. We got some teaser images that were later taken down, but it's been made clear throughout that this is several years away still. But finally, we got the news that Funcom is actually partnering with another studio, Nuclear, which is it's a hybrid studio that's based in Germany, but they have employees like all over the world. So they also have like a component of remote work. And so they're going to be teaming up together on this game. And the biggest takeaway for me, at least, is that they're talking about how the scope of this game, like on the Nuclear website, it talks about like how that they're coming on board to help support the expanded scope of Dune. And there's the quote from Funcom's CEO Rui Casais: "As the Dune open world survival game is the most ambitious project we've ever undertaken at Funcom, having skilled and reliable partners is an absolute must." So they're really talking up the scale of this game. I want to hear from you, Simon. Are you excited about this project?
So I'll be honest, I'm not a big gamer. I play my FIFA. I still have my PS4. Like we were talking before recording, PS5s it's like Where's Waldo kind of. They're impossible to find. If it's done right, it will make me want to upgrade to a next gen system. And as much as I love Dune, so I would probably definitely check out the game. Yeah, I'm probably the wrong person to ask, but I do love a good game. Like I remember when the first Knights of the Old Republic came out, I spent 6 months playing that game every day. And a couple of my friends were like, "Are you ever going to come back outside?" I'm like, "No, it's cool. I'm in Star Wars land. I'm having fun." So yes, I'm interested. I'm also interested in knowing what type of game it's going to be. If it's going to be mission based, or if it's going to be like walk around inside the environment. So for now, I'll be playing FIFA, and one day I know I'll have a Dune game somewhere out there.
So this is a dream come true for me, because in 1980, would have been 80, probably 5, I was in a computer class where we were learning BASIC, and I tried to design a Dune game. And of course, I didn't get very far, right? Because you can't do a lot with BASIC. But to be able to, I as a teenager, I envisioned what it would feel like. And I even remember having this prescient moment where I could picture, what if it was so photorealistic that you felt like you were there? So I'm not a gamer, but I am over the moon excited about this, because to be able to kind of fulfill that teenage sort of fantasy I had would be totally cool. And with the games, and of course my kids play games, and so I do sometimes, just the immersive experience is just incredible now. So I think it has a lot of potential. And what I read is that it's going to be survival based, which makes a lot of sense. You can go in a lot of directions with that, with the Dune universe and the planet. So I'm over the moon excited about it. I think it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, and Funcom are the makers of the game Conan Exiles. I haven't played it myself, but I've heard some good things about it. But like what stands out from that game is it is really open world. So there is a lot of it's a sandbox type game. There's character creation elements. There's survival. You can go hunting, fishing. There's player versus environment challenges. There's player versus player combat. And it's a game that continues to receive expansions. Like when I was doing research about it, I saw that they've just released an expansion in the previous week and added more elements to the game. So yeah, it does seem that there is a lot of opportunity in that regards. Johnny, have you heard anything?
I haven't really been too informed on this front. I knew for a long time though they had been planning on doing some Dune games, different styles of games. And I grew up playing PlayStation and PS1, PS2, PS3, PS4, and now PS5. I don't do it as much as I used to just because I have so much movie stuff going on. And, being an adult in the real world, having a job and everything certainly gets in the way of that, and relationships and all that good stuff. But I certainly still love playing games. But yeah, it's hard to say. It's like with video games, I can't really get that interested or excited just hearing like words, because I feel like so often, and gamers know all about this, like you get burned or you get told something's going to be a certain way, or it might look a certain way, and then ultimately it is nothing like that, doesn't play like that, doesn't look like that. So I think, an open world Dune game with amazing, next gen graphics and gameplay and action, I think that would be like unbelievable. We'll see where this goes. There's, 2 years until the next movie. Maybe things will change. Maybe they'll gain more leverage and try to do something else or move it, or, there's a lot that could happen. But I'm certainly interested if they were to come out with all I want is a good game. I don't really care how you get it done or who's making it or what the style is. If it's fun, if it's interesting, I'll spend money on it and play it.
And there's several directions it could go in. Like, they could just take an existing game and sort of like reskin it to make it Dune. And then it'll be interesting, right? Because you can spend some hours exploring like Arrakis and like nature and going through the survival elements, maybe some Fremen fighting against Harkonnen. So I think there will always be some enjoyment. I think what I most want to like hear is what the story element is going to be like, what sort of narrative that they're going to tie into game. Because for me, that will like make or break whether this is going to be like a success or not, but we'll have to see on that. And yeah, I do want to comment. So as mentioned, this game, they've said themselves in interviews as recent as last year that this is still several years away. And we don't normally do like unverified rumors on Dune Newsnet, but I just wanted to mention that there has been like a list of game release dates, like it had a bunch of different games on it. And this game was listed for 2023, which could totally be a placeholder. It could be that the list was not accurate at all. But it would totally make sense, that they're sort of saying, okay, like the first movie has done well. Now we have part 2 in 2023. Let's really accelerate and like go all full speed ahead to get a game out there. So that could be a possibility that we will see it then. But yeah, again, like this is unverified rumors, so don't want to get anybody's hopes up. Last story for today is we got the preview for Dune, A Whisper of Caladan Seas. So this is the next comic book one-shot that's coming out from Boom Studios. So they've been doing the House Atreides comic series, which is just wrapped out. It was a 12-issue limited series, which basically adapted the whole of the expanded novel Dune House Atreides. We also got in the summer an earlier one-shot, which was Dune, Blood of the Sardaukar. And now we have Dune, A Whisper of Caladan Seas. And both of these one-shots, they're set during the assault on Arrakeen. So it's basically tying into the movie. We saw those events on screen, like the Harkonnens and Sardaukar attacking the Atreides and the complete overwhelmed chaos. And there was a lot going on there. So from the previous one shot, we got to see it from the Sardaukar perspective, and now we're going to get to see it from the perspective of Atreides soldiers. So Simon, starting with you, have you already had a look at the preview? Any first thoughts?
Yeah, so as people may remember, I was a big fan of The Blood of the Sardaukar. And like I said in my original review, it's interesting because you see it from a different point of view. And now we're going to get it from the Atreides look of it. So I'm always a fan when it, like I like to say, when it switches camera angles and goes to a different point of view. So the art, I'm not totally sold on, but that's, everyone has their opinion on the art. I will definitely be picking this up. I'm curious. I love that they're doing this. I would love if they do even more little side stories eventually. So Dune comics are good. I know that my local comic store sells out pretty fast, which I'm kind of surprised and kind of happy. And I've heard they've been having to go back and reorder some of the House of Atreides stuff that we'll eventually dive into. So I think it comes out the last week of the year, which is crazy that the year is almost over, but that's a different story. I'll be reading it and telling you what I think of it when it comes out.
Garin, does this premise interest you?
Yeah. I was actually pleasantly surprised with Blood of the Sardaukar. I used to be much more into comics than I have been in recent years, but I really enjoyed. In fact, in subsequent viewings of Dune, I remember kind of thinking back, watching the Sardaukar in the fighting sequences in the film, actually thinking back to that comic, Blood of the Sardaukar, where it really fleshes out, how these people become these bloodthirsty killers and what they have to go through in the world that they have to grow up in to become who they are. And I loved the dimensions and the depth that created. And I realize, we can get into the canon discussion that's not, officially a part of the Dune novel. But I really want this to really expand beyond and to have more detail and more nuances related to the film that I just have seen a whole bunch of times. I really like that. So the premise of this is interesting because I love the way Villeneuve did this battle sequence and the attack on Arrakeen. I thought he really nailed it. But there could be a lot of aspects to that would be really interesting to see, and this is one of them, right? So this is going to get into more detail about the Atreides soldiers and what they have to go through, and there's kind of a story along, saving this group of soldiers. So I'm really all for this. I really was pleased with the Blood of the Sardaukar, and if this is equal to that in the storytelling depth, then I'm excited to read it.
I agree with you completely about going back and rewatching the movie, and Blood of Sardaukar is on my mind quite a bit when I go back and watch it, especially when we see them when Piter comes and kind of tells them, hey, the Emperor needs you to do this mission. It's having more respect for the Sardaukars, I guess, and knowing what they've been through.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that both Blood of the Sardaukar and this upcoming one shot, so they're basically 40-page issue comics, and so they're self-contained story. You just have to pick up that one and you get the complete story. They're both based on short stories that were written by Frank Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson, so part of the expanded Dune materials that they've written. And this was actually based on the very first short story that they wrote together. So even before Dune House of Atreides. So I believe 1997, 1998. So the story itself has been out there for some time, and it's available in short story corrections. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Garin. It's great to see this these different perspectives expanding on what we've seen on screen. So hopefully that other people are enjoying that as well. So Johnny, I know that you said you weren't reading the earlier comics. Does the premise of like a one-shot self-contained story appeal to you, or is this something that you're going to skip?
Yeah, I love one-shots. I have yet to read Blood of Sardaukar. just because, again, there's like a million things I feel like are going on. But I would like to read it at some point because I've heard nothing but good things, and from you guys especially, I think it bodes well. So I'm curious to see what you guys think about this, and then if and when, hopefully after that, I can get kind of caught up on both. And I'm curious to see where the comics go in the next 2-3 years with the franchise and the position it is now. I think there's a lot of possibility there, and getting even, it's not all about the names of the artists and the writers and whatnot, but I think it'd be interesting to see, who else shows, interest as a creator on the creator side, and who they look to go after as far as stories that they can tell totally, separate from what's going on in the movies, but also potentially lining up with the movies, adjacent to the movies, whatever.
We're at the early stages of this Dune fandom, which is a really exciting place to be. I like the fact that so far with these one shots, we really do have alignment, so Brian Herbert and Herbert Properties. I like the fact that we're keeping this aligned. We're not, they're introducing new characters. These are names that I'm not familiar with from the original novels, but I like that they're holding true to the rules that Frank Herbert established, in this universe. So I hope that as we continue, and this fandom is gonna grow, and it could become far more widespread than even the four of us think it will. But I hope that somewhere along the line, it doesn't branch out and become so diverse, because that's what kind of happened with me a little bit with Star Wars. Obviously, I grew up, with those original films, but it got to the point where some of the derivative creative works were so far beyond my realm of experience that they didn't appeal to me. I know they did appeal to many other people, and maybe even some of my close friends, if I recall correctly. So I do like that reading both. I haven't read this one yet, but the Blood of Sardaukar, I like that it felt like it fit right into Frank Herbert's world. So I just wanted to mention that, because that as a real fan, I want to make sure that this is all aligned and it all feels appropriate. Maybe I'll change my mind as the years go by, and it'll be acceptable to me to have it go in 9 different directions with completely different ideas. So anyway, that's just something that's important to me as a fan.
I agree with you, Garin, about Star Wars. I also grew up with the original 3, then fell in love with the prequels. And I don't want to bash Disney per se, but since Disney has come around, there's some stuff where I'm like, is it even necessary? Like the Bad Batch. They can do with the comics is, we know there's a gap between part 1 and part 2 of the movie. So what if they tell the stories, like maybe side stories that set up part 2 also for the audience, the people that haven't read the book? Maybe we get a one shot of Raban, what is he up to? Maybe we get a Stilgard one shot as we get closer to part 2, and kind of reintroduce these characters to fans that were just introduced with this movie. Or maybe they're like, oh wait, I'll pick up this comic, I heard the first movie's good, and that gives them a chance to go back, and it creates hype around part 2 when we get closer to it. I know they did like a Kylo Ren one shot, a Snoke one shot before that horrible movie that is The Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, I think there's just so much opportunity directions that they could go in. Like as mentioned, we're talking about like the movie, like, and most of the stuff here has been either like a prequel to the movie or sort of tied into that area. But also when they, because we have the Dune the Sisterhood TV series that's coming up, and that's going to be an opportunity to tell, completely original stories that haven't been, told before in any format. So yeah, like really, I think the sky's the limit in terms of potential, but I definitely agree with Garen's point. I think it's important that they stay true to the original story and the universe that Frank Herbert created.
It's hard to imagine this becoming like a Star Wars style situation. I'm not a Star Wars fan, so I don't care. But like, I think that it is, it can be a slippery slope, and you still want to maintain that artistic integrity, and you still want to respect the source material and have it all make sense and make it seem worthwhile. You don't want to just be doing it for money's sake or just to keep the rights or things like that kind of come around. So we'll see what happens. That's just kind of my feelings, and I agree with kind of what you all are saying about that. And it's very early. It's so early. It took Star Wars how long to get to where it is now? I mean, I don't think anyone expected in the 70s and 80s that this was going to be going on now. You know what I mean? No one could have anticipated the prequels or the sequels or Disney taking over. That's like a kind of surreal situation. So we'll see. And Star Wars Dune, a lot of comparison there, but it's not really totally valid. Like there's not the wide, all-encompassing, I think accessibility of Dune that Star Wars has. That's again why I'm so impressed and happy that it's doing as well as it is, and with different demographics and age groups and genders and generations and everything. I think it's very, very heartening. And hopefully for years to come, we'll see what it looks like. But for now, I'm just trying to focus like on the movie side of it. And then if anything else pops up and ends up impressing me, it'll just be extra, I suppose.
Dune is not the real Joseph W. Campbell hero's journey, and Star Wars is. So Johnny's talking about this, vast mega appeal of Star Wars. People don't realize it yet, but that's not what Dune is. It's the antithesis of that. And so it'll be interesting. And I'm thrilled that people are liking it, because that's actually what I love so much about the original stories, is that it's not the standard hero's journey. It causes you to question religion, government, politics, everything, society. I love that. So it's just totally different.
I agree with you completely. It's especially after I was editing the last show, I was just in the back of my head, I was like, oh, people are not ready. I mean, we've been warning them, but if Messiah comes around, people are really not ready. Like, I don't know how they're going to even market it as something that's friendly to some audiences. It's going to get dark. It's going to get dark. It's going to get morbid. It's not that journey. It is a hero's journey, but I guess the book's been out for, I'm talking about Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk. I think the book's been out for like 20 plus years, because the movie's been out 20 years. It's very much, you think it's going one way. And I'm not saying Paul has a twin or an imaginary friend like in Fight Club. But it's that twist that you don't see coming, and you're like, oh, crap. I can say other words, but I don't want to get centered on.
It's going to be awesome, because people are just going to be like, wow. And it's just, I can't wait.
Yeah. You think Anakin goes dark? No.
Yeah, that's like the whole thing. I mean, we talked about this, and I'm not going to belabor the point too much, but at the end of our movie discussion, I was really thinking about and talking about like that tent scene again. There's so much that is going to go back to that, and people are going to look at that so much and it really tear it apart. And the fact that Villeneuve is intending to do not just part 2, but then a Dune Messiah film if he gets his way, that cohesion is going to be so great and important. And that visual language and all the allusions and hints, I think, are all going to line up very well. And he's such a meticulous filmmaker and artist that I think it's going to be, you really kind of ask for a better person to take this on. And I've been saying that for a long time. I think everyone's aware of that by now, but it's really going to be, this was the easy part in a way. Like as far as making it seem like, oh, this, like you're familiar with this, like you can watch this and kind of keep up. And still part 2 is going to be, he says it's going to be more exciting. There's going to be more action, more entertaining. He's set up, he thinks that that's going to be an easier movie because he's already done the groundwork, which in that instance, yes, it will be much easier. But from a storytelling perspective and a character perspective, I think that's going to be very, very interesting to see how they do it, how they pull it off, and how they present it, and how people ultimately react to it. Because that I think certainly how part 2 is received by fans, by general audience, by critics, awards, financials, all that. That is going to be the key to whether or not Dune Messiah happens. Because even if they go ahead and do Dune Messiah, because part 2 does so well, and Dune Messiah just like pisses everyone off and they hate it, and they're like, no, this is the worst, and not, hashtag not my Paul. Like that will be who cares at that point? Because Villeneuve got to tell his story. It's done essentially. Maybe that would have ramifications with other shows or spin-off projects, but we would have the trilogy that he wants to do, and we would really have a significant story character arc. And I think that is why I'm so confident that will end up happening, because I think part 2 is going to be just exciting and entertaining and action packed and accessible enough, or even if it's starting to allude to certain things going on or what might come, and that will be upsetting or like will have its detractors, it's not really going to matter that much. And so, yeah, that's very exciting. I think that's what we're all like. I don't want to rush through this journey that we're all going on or like about to go on, but I can't wait to see what that's going to look like.
But let me just paint the picture, and then I'll stop talking, I promise. But let's just, in our prescient visions as a team here, just imagine Children of Dune, God Emperor. Just imagine what that experience would be like on the epic scale that Villeneuve can do, right? Now, will audiences be able to handle it? Will they run out of the theater screaming? I don't know, but I just would love for that to happen, because that was my experience reading those books. Is it was like I traveled to a completely different universe. It was awesome.
And yeah, just talking about this, we're just like touching the surface, but there's going to be so much for us to dig into in the coming months, years. So yeah, stay tuned. We're going to go deep on this show. For now, though, that's all the news that we have for this week. So we're going to wrap up there. And yeah, look forward. Our next episode, we're going to have a special guest interview, someone who was involved in the movie. So look forward to that. Yeah, so that was all for the show today. So Simon, where can people find you?
So I'm mostly on Insta, Twitter, sdowdy. First in the show, last name. I hate saying it, but like we've been saying, it's only the beginning. I'm excited for more Dune content, and I'm kind of excited that we can talk about more Dune that's not involving the movie.
Hey, just excited to go through all these different aspects of the Dune fandom at this point. So you can find me on Twitter at Dune Companion, and appreciate all the support. Love all your comments. Please send more comments, thoughts, ideas, critiques, whatever. I love all your interactions. So thanks.
Yes, I certainly echo all of that. I love, I would still love it if I've said this before, probably, but just if we were all sitting here talking to no one, like they would still, I'd still get gratification out of that. But yeah, certainly having people watch and listen and leave questions and comments, and that certainly means a lot, and we appreciate that, and I like interacting and responding. So please, stay tuned. We have a lot to come in the next weeks and months, and beyond the movie, and with part 2 and comics and video games. Clearly, as we've talked about today, there's a lot to think about, and it seems like we find it's funny because the movie's been out for quite a while now, especially in other parts of the world. I feel like every week I'm like, what are we going to have to talk about? And then of course we still talk for an hour and a half. So hopefully people are pleased by that. But yeah, Johnny Sobchak, you can find me on Twitter if you haven't already, for more Dune takes and movie related takes and things like that. And we'll see you soon.
And this was Marcus Gabriel, editor at DuneNewsNet.com. And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at DuneNewsNet. So talk to you next week.
We hope you've enjoyed Dune Talk. Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you know when the next episode drops. Stay tuned to DuneNewsNet.com and add us to your social feeds. Be the first to hear breaking news and reviews.